God. So rather than, because the point being is, if we exist and the universe exists, we would say that the foundational position, the default position is something which didn't exist and it has come into existence. There has to be an outside entity, being, with three necessary qualities. It should have knowledge, it should have power, and it should have intent. It should have knowledge of the thing which it's making, it should have the ability to bring it to existence, and it should intend to. Otherwise, why did it happen? Why? As in, it the intent there. So the point being is, if you accept our existence, and then you're saying it is possible without a creator, we're saying our default position is the general understood default position by mankind. So you would have to, we would say the burden is actually on you to explain how we exist, the universe exists, our ability to communicate, our ability to digest, our ability to reproduce, our ability to grow, all these things around us, to breathe, to have a conscience, to have memories. We would say it's a burden upon you to tell us how this can happen without a God.
So if I was to answer that, I'd probably try to limit it to these 2 points.
Yeah.
It's the case that the assertion that it's these 3 things. I don't necessarily have an issue.
Knowledge, power, and intent.
Yes, the intent. I don't know that that's necessarily true, which is why I maintain that the burden of proof still remains with you. And the reason why I would say I'm warranted in saying that is because it isn't necessarily consistent with the science of what we know about how we've come to be here.
Can you show me anything which didn't exist, which came into existence, where we are sure of that fact, that didn't have this behind it? Knowledge, ability, and intent. Like simply like your coat, your headphones, your bag,
water,
the pavement.
Water.
So water, you're saying it came into existence without knowledge, power, and intent.
So it's come about as what we understand about the physical happenings of how this world works. In terms of what we know about physics and atoms, we understand that hydrogen molecules, H2O, so hydrogen and oxygen coming together and combining. That's how we understand that's come together. It has nothing to do with knowledge, it has nothing to do with intent, it's nothing to do, it's our understanding of how water has been created. It's out of our understanding of physics and science.
No, but for example, to make it simple, if you have a cake in front of us, and now we explain that this cake, it has flour, it has sugar, it has eggs, it has milk, etc., etc. Just by us identifying the necessary ingredients and the fact that this cake contains these necessary ingredients, can we now say that no one made the cake?
No, I'll tell you why you're right. In that example, you would be correct, but it's not only for the reason that you're stating. The reason is because we have evidence of there being bakers, and when somebody bakes and they use these ingredients, a cake is formed. Give you a good example. How do you differentiate between a beaver dam being built and just sticks that come in together that just form and maybe look like a beaver dam? Like they're not just a random composition of sticks and an actual beaver dam. Like how do you differentiate between those two?
I would presume by the way it's structured, the way it's organized, and we could say the presence of beavers.
And also, like you probably...
But even without the beavers, just the way it's set up, the system, we would say like this.
I agree. And you probably, would I be right in saying you probably look like, if there's been maybe like when I say footsteps, paw steps or whatever it is that the beaver has.
I don't think that's necessary.
No, not necessary. But I think the long and short is we both agree that you would have good paws because you would look at the structure, you would look at maybe if I don't know, is it fur that they
might leave behind,
that they might have left.
But I don't think that's. I think that's adding to it. What's necessary is just looking at the. Because I see where your argument is, and you can see where my argument's going there. I think just by looking at the structure, without any other evidence of footsteps, a beaver sitting on top of it, the fur, you would say this has been made by, and it has power, intelligence, and intent behind it.
Not necessarily, because what you would do is you would look at all the evidence of where you know that beavers, because it's by comparison that you say, well, because we have all this knowledge of how beavers put these structures together, I can say item A of how that's built is consistent with how beavers usually build dams. And then when you say, well, option B, picture B, that's just random sticks. It's because it's not comparable to A.
Could you put two words on it? This is organized, and this is just disorganized. This is chaos.
Those aren't the only two options, but that would play a factor, yes. But it's not the only. I wouldn't say it's only even the most substantive, but I'd say that would definitely form part of the reason for your decision making. That's what I would agree with.
To be honest, I think from what you said, I would say that it's making my point for me.
So what I'm saying is, I agree insofar as it is a factor, but I'm saying it's not the only factor. And because I'll give you an example. If you sat down and you said, well, it's the reason why you can tell is because it's so organized. It could have been the case in option B that it was also organized quite well, but you would look at other factors to determine whether it just wouldn't solely be down to organization.
I don't agree.
You think it would just be solely down, like you wouldn't look to see if there were beaver trails, if there were maybe fur or other things, or consistency in the structure.
And if you didn't find that?
I think maybe it would add to it, but I wouldn't say it would be the only.
Like, because when we add all of these other pieces of evidence, footsteps, a beaver living inside it, or the fur.
It doesn't have to be inside. No, but I get your
the fur. Okay, the fur or this. This would give the general idea that we are presuming that a beaver's dam built with these three things, with knowledge, power, ability, and intent, is something similar or comparable to one where the wood is just collected in the river and it's come to a narrow point and it's gathered there and it's blocking the water. Do you think that it's someone who has some experience would come across both of them and say, and obviously it's based on the experience, I'm not sure which is which. I mean, because obviously I haven't looked into this subject, but
we're neither beavers.
We're not beavers. But I would find it so strange for someone to say, this is actually purely random, without any order, without any intent behind. So, the example when you give water, this is presuming that we know that water didn't exist and we saw it come into existence without any creator. But as a Muslim, I would still say the water itself would necessitate there has to be a creator.
All I'm saying is, whether you do it for phones or you do it for the beaver dam or this building here or this structure here, is that we all have evidence for how these things are created. And this is why we can draw a reasonable conclusion that it just wouldn't appear by magic. Because we know architects, we understand developers exist, we understand structural engineers, they draw plans and whatnot. We understand that, concrete blocks or whatnot, these components when put together, because we have an understanding for all of these things, it's more reasonable that didn't come together by chance, but it came by together, that we understand that builders, developers, and the issue that I take is when someone says, well, how do you know that this came by chance, is that we don't have the evidence for it. We have the evidence to substantiate that builders or developers built that.
So, I think me and you, we don't have the evidence that someone designed this and someone built it.
We do.
this particular building.
As a matter of fact,
this particular building.
we can see if we wanted to.
No, but this particular building. I'm going to be a bit not rude, but
no.
Do you know the company that designed this? Do you know the architects that designed it? You can find out, but do you know at the moment?
So I don't know at the moment, but I see where you're going, and I'm addressing that point. I could find the architects.
Yeah.
I could look at the local authority,
and then you'd believe it. But before that, you wouldn't believe that.
No, but even without having these things,
because I'm convinced.
Yeah,
I'm convinced that someone built this, and there was an architect, and there was a designer, and I'm convinced without having to know who they were, or without having because for example, if we had a 10 in a row, I would apply the same rule to all 10.
So this is where I in fact agree with you. I even without seeing the documentation or the planning permission when
you're convinced.
Granted, I'm convinced, and the reason why I'm convinced is because we don't have evidence of these structures coming about as they do in any other way. The only way in which these structures come about is when we know that architects were involved, we know developers were involved, we know that planning permission was granted, we understand that building control signed it off, we understand that for this certain materials would have been used to keep it upright and all of this. So even without, I could corroborate it, but our understanding as humans on this earth is that this would have only come about from, architects, construction site, etc., etc.
Say that general principle. We can apply it to a building. We can apply it to the buses. We can apply it to the roads.
But not everything.
Your headphones. Is there something which we know on a material level in front of us, which came into existence without these three?
So I gave the example of water.
But you can't give the example of water.
Why can't I?
Because
it's material and it's something that exists.
No, but are you able to prove that these atoms, these molecules, they came into existence without a creator, and they came mixed together without a creator, and then they have the water cycle without a creator? Are you able to prove that?
I'm not able to prove it, which is why I'm saying I don't. So my position
that's the point.
So my point is, I don't know how that's come about. So I wouldn't say to it that it's most likely a creator, because the way in which I can say that, well, do you know what? It would most likely be an architect. It would most likely be a developer, and they've most likely used concrete blocks and whatnot. I cannot use that same line of reasoning.
No, but perhaps you missed my point.
Go on.
Because my question was quite specific.
Okay, go on.
Can you demonstrate something which you know, which has come into existence without knowledge, ability, and intent behind it? And then you let me see. And then you gave the example of water.
Yeah.
So when I asked you, so you know that this has come into existence without power, knowledge, and intent, without a creator, and you said, well, I can't actually prove that. So that just takes us back to the beginning.
So this is what I'm going to say about the burden of proof being shifted.
Yeah.
And maybe I didn't articulate this in a way I should have.
Yeah.
But my point, and maybe I misheard your question, but the point that I was trying to make in response is more that I wouldn't adopt a burden of proof because I couldn't even prove. I wouldn't say to you that I know that we definitely didn't have a creator, and I know that it must have had to come about by this way or that way. My position is, let's say it's the water. It's here and it's in existence. Well, I don't even want to use the word existence, but I know that it's here.
It exists. We're getting wet when it rains.
Yeah. No, it's here. Okay, fine. Yeah. Let's use existence. But I don't know what the thing was behind all I can say to you is that it's the water cycle as to why we have the water here. I couldn't, if you're making an assertion that it's a creation, I couldn't corroborate that, and I couldn't substantiate that.
I understand your point.
My knowledge of how we've got water is limited to what we understand about the rain cycle, and I couldn't go beyond that point. If you're turning, and this is why we wouldn't reverse, and for the exact reason that you just gave, it's because it's not possible for me to turn around and be like, well, you're saying it's definitely an architect hasn't put it here. Well, maybe did a fireman, like I couldn't go through all the things that it couldn't have been, and that's why we don't place the burden of proof in that way. It's a person who's making a claim, and then if they're saying, well, the reason why, we have the rain cycle, but the reason why it says because God put that in place. Yeah. I don't know whether that's the case. I can't substantiate.
See what it is. Like Allah mentions in Quran. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. Allah mentions in the creation of the heavens and the earth, so the earth and the skies, and in the alternation of day and night, there is a sign for people of understanding. So we say this itself is a sign, but the point I'm making is, if we have two basic options, I mean, someone may bring a third or fourth or fifth, but two basic options. We have a creator, a God, and we do not have a creator. Okay, that's the two options. As a Muslim, I'm saying most definitely. I mean, here I'm a Muslim, but I think this would represent other religious beliefs as well.
Christians.
I mean, we differ on many things, but the fact that there's a creator, the concept that there's a creator, and then you're saying you can't prove there is a creator, and you can't prove that we need a creator. I would say that because I can demonstrate a default position of everything which we can ascertain and find out how this thing which didn't exist came into existence. Like, obviously I'm not talking about the sun, the moon and the stars which existed before we did. I'm not talking about the planet we live on. I'm not talking about ourselves. But everything which we know, like the car, the building, the headphones, we know that the set, or not the set rule, the fixed rule is, this had to be made by someone who had ability, had knowledge, ability, and intent. I would say that unless you can show where that doesn't, where you're sure that doesn't take place, then I would say it would only make sense to apply that to the universe as well.
No, because I forgot what the logical
fallacy
is
that I'm using here.
But I can't remember the exact name of it.
Yeah.
The logical fallacy here is that what happens in my house we can't make conclusions about what happens in the universe. So I'll give you a good example.
If I drop an apple on the floor, if I drop an apple in my house and it falls on the floor, can I conclude that would happen outside?
Precisely. And I'll tell you why. There's a flaw in it. If I draw an apple in my house, the rules of the world we live in, I'm so happy you've used this example. Gravity applies.
Have I walked into a trap?
You have.
Okay. So, I don't think so, but anyway.
So the apple will drop.
Yeah.
But when you use about the universe, if we go outside.
No, I said outside. I didn't say outside the universe. I said outside. Like outside my house.
You mentioned not just now, but your former point about like it being reasonable to conclude that God created.
When you throw something, it travels in a straight direction.
Hang on. So I agree. So your point was, and this is where it's analogous, is that because this jacket is created, that it would be reasonable to conclude that the universe was also created. So why I'm drawing the analogy is that it's a logical fallacy, because let's say, it doesn't have to be my house, but say my house, if I drop it, the rules of gravity apply. But when we go outside and like we're on the moon or we're in space, the rules of gravity no longer apply. So this is a direct comparison.
They no longer apply, or they take place in a different.
They don't apply in the same way.
So they do apply, but in a different way. Like
I'm
not a scientist. You have the mass of the Earth, the mass of the moon.
I'm sure somebody's going to correct.
Yeah, someone will shoot us down.
I'm saying,
but it still applies, but it's due to the mass.
Okay, so fine, it applies, but it doesn't apply in the same way. But my point still stands.
Like let me give a small example. We can say that if Mike Tyson hit me,
Are you sure you want to be hit?
No, I don't want to be. If Mike Tyson hit me, especially in his prime, and a child hit me, and then you're saying, oh, we can't say the same thing applies. No, we can. Because of his strength, because of his force, it had this much effect on my face. Because of the child's strength and force, it had this much effect. So I would say that the gravity, as far as we know, will still apply. But it will be a different because of different environment.
If we want to be more precise, and I'm sure somebody might correct me, but maybe not that no gravity exists, but the rules of physics differ quite differently. And
Do they?
Not in the sense of gravity.
Do they? Or is the rule the same?
No, in the sense
is the rule the same because the mass of the moon is less than the mass of the Earth? So the rule is still there.
What I'm saying is the rule is still there, and maybe this might be semantics, but I hope that we would all agree that the way that it would drop, or the pace at which it would drop, it wouldn't be subject to the exact same rules. Hence why there would. Hence why.
I'm sorry, it'd be easier, just if you don't mind.
Hence why, if we did that same thing in space, there would be a disparity in the speed at which that would drop, and what the rules are slightly different.
And scientists, I think they could work it out due to the mass of the moon and just the mass. So therefore, the same rule applies.
But my point still remains, because what I'm saying is that no matter how you want to phrase it, the way that the apple will drop here, I'm saying gravity may still exist, but because of how the mass is and how it relates.
I'm sorry, Bismillah. Say what you want to hear. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, you're talking about rules and stuff, but when you use your analogy, it doesn't make sense, because something with a smaller mass is always attracted to something that's bigger. So you could use the idea that, of course, the mass in space is very limited in open space. So to use your analogy makes no sense.
It does make sense.
No, because if I were to drop space, let's say if I were to even put a minuscule amount of force downwards, it would infinitely travel downwards. The same rules apply inside our planet to outside upwards. The speed of how fast it drops.
Like 1 + 1.
There are different conditions.
Yeah,
and different ways of.
I'm saying in semantics, but the consequence, the focus is, and maybe because I'm not a science person, I'm not explaining it in the right way. But the point that I'm trying to make, which I believe can't be refuted, is that whether I'm using the right or wrong language, I hope you can understand. But the rule.
Yeah.
So the reason why I use rule is because
I would say the rule is the same, but the factors affect it.
Or whatever.
But to be a rule, it needs to be universal.
Let me make it simple. 1 + 1 in my house.
Yeah.
Is it going to be 1 + 1 in New York?
Yeah.
And if we're in the outer universe and there's no air to breathe, would it still be 1 + 1 = 2?
It will be. I think maybe how I should articulate this, and this is what I'm trying to say, is that the way physics works, and in terms of how the force of gravity, when I do this, I fall down straight away. That wouldn't happen. So there is a difference in how that happens. Would I be wrong or right?
When Mike Tyson hits me, which we hope doesn't happen, and when the little child hits me, there's a difference in the state of my face.
I think you're phrasing it right.
I accept that.
But it's still fixed.
So however you want to phrase it,
the rule itself is fixed. It's how, as he said.
So therefore, going back to the point of, if something didn't exist, for it to come into existence, all I know is, for that thing to come into existence, there is a necessity of knowledge, power, and intent. So I would say that would apply. If I believe that applies for the universe and us. If you're saying that it doesn't you're not making a definite statement, but you're saying it doesn't necessarily apply. It's possible for something to come into existence in an organized, structured manner without knowledge, ability, and intent. I would say demonstrate it on a normal, everyday level.
So this is why.
And I know. without being, I know you can't.
So this is where I've rebutted the point, and whether I'm using the right or the wrong words, my point still remains, because you're saying that because of what we know about how physics works on Earth, and we're reasonable, or we're justified in concluding that, well, it's most likely that the universe came to the same way that there was a creator behind this. It's reasonable to conclude, and the point that I'm making to rebut that point,
it's not reasonable.
It's not necessarily.
It's reasonable, but it's not definite.
It's not. You're not necessarily justified or reason. You're not. I'll say you're not justified in holding that belief, and the reason why is because just in terms of gravity, using that as an example, you're saying the way that gravity applies here is different. However you want to phrase it, in one way or another, it's different. And how it's applied.
Let me make it more simple. I would say all you have to do is show us something which we can demonstrate, which came into existence in a structured, systematic way, or not way, itself.
How would you articulate? Because my point is correct.
Let me talk about gravity. Gravity. Let's say that's
I agree, but you understand what I'm trying to say, and just for the sake of semantics.
But as he said, it doesn't.
That's not the point, because we can all three agree that the point is the way when I drop a ball here, the same reaction wouldn't occur.
No, the same exact reaction would occur, but the speed at what it occurs at wouldn't be.
So there's a
due to the mass of the Earth and due to the mass of the Moon. But the rule is fixed.
Yeah, that's fine.
But the rule is fixed. That's my point.
So my point
is in physics or in any certain part of science, if we're going to even go to astrology,
they are so close within conversation.
Sorry, sir. Can we move this way, if you don't mind?
All rules in astrology, physics, and stuff like that. For example, the conservation of mass, that's a simple rule, but that's universal. No matter what you do, that rule is applicable in that situation no matter what, but how it's applied, for example, how fast the ball drops and at the rate it drops, how many particles in the air, that's all dependent on the condition the ball is dropped in. For example, the moon, the air density there is extremely.
But the rule is still the same, isn't it?
So I agree. So I've even
from that what he's saying is intelligence behind creation. That rule is.
Can I just give maybe a more simple example? 3 times 3 equals 9.
Agreed.
5 times 5 equals 25.
Agreed.
So for someone to say, well, 9 and 25 is not the same, but the rule is still the same.
No, so
you see what I mean?
So I accept, and I even said it like probably.
So the gravity rule is still the same.
The way I'm articulating it is it's not because I'm not a science person. But the long and short, however you get in, I think if we can move past the semantics, is I don't know if it's whether the way it's applied or whatever it is, but the end or the end point is that. Maybe whether it's the speed at which it works, where it applies, I don't know the correct phraseology. But we all accept that the effect here won't be the same.
Oh, the effect is different. Okay, so like 9 is different to 25, but the rule is the same.
Fine, I accept the rule's the same, but the effect is different in the universe.
So the making of your coat and the making of the sun is different, because your coat is not the sun and the sun is not your coat. But I would say that still the rule applies. I would say reasonably the rule applies that for something that didn't exist to come into an existence in an organized manner, it necessitates knowledge, ability, and intent. Can I just mention something else? There's a similar argument in the Quran in chapter 52, where Allah, in the Quran there's a lot of things where people are asked questions or they're asked to think. Allah mentions أَمْ خُلِقُوا مِنْ غَيْرِ شَيْءٍ أَمْ هُمُ الْخَالِقُونَ أَمْ خَلَقُوا السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ بَلْ لَا يُوقِنُونَ. I'll just come to this in a minute. On a small point, what's quite interesting is if you read the Quran, you'll see the Quran, the main emphasis is not proving a creator. The main emphasis is establishing the fact that the creator, he alone deserves to be worshipped. Prophets, angels, stones shouldn't be worshipped. because they're not the creator. Because in history, the main argument between, we would say, the messenger sent by God and the people was not a creator. Because generally people have always accepted a creator. It's quite a recent thing where people, you have to now argue is there a creator or not.
I don't necessarily. I think
like people have said. People have said when you look in history and you look at, obviously people use different language. They represent the God in different way. They worship God in different ways. But the central concept that there's been a God has generally been in all people. So I would say the Quran doesn't give much, but the arguments are very simple in Quran. If I just come to this verse, these two verses I mentioned. It says, "Am khuliqu min ghayri shay." Were they created from nothing? Or did they create themselves? Or did they create the heavens and the earth, as in what we're inhabiting? And then it mentions something which I find quite amazing. The last verse, the last part of the verse says, "Bal hum la yuqinun," but they have no certainty. So here, some options are put forward. We exist. I think we agree on this. Did we create ourselves? We say this is not possible. Something which doesn't exist can't make itself. Did they create themselves? No. Were they created for nothing? We would say this is also impossible. So here, without mentioning, we would say in the verse it has a necessary reality. There has to be a creator. And then let me just finish. Then it mentions, even if when we exist, we have to have a universe which we live in, atmosphere, air to breathe, water, etc., water system. But then the last point is very interesting. It says, "Bal la yuqinun," but they have no certainty. What I was, from my limited understanding, or when I've tried to follow atheists or discuss with atheists or agnostics, none of them have certainty. They have, it could be this, it could be that, and they see it as a good thing that we're open-minded, we may find out in the future. But here we have a book written, revealed to a person, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who we believe he could not read or write, and he's made this statement that they have no certainty. And I've never come across anyone who opposes a creator having certainty.
So this is the issue, is that you don't have to have certainty, and you don't even have to have 100% certainty.
Yeah.
Because we can't be absolutely certain about anything, and sometimes the most intellectually honest answer is we don't know. The thing about humans, and I'm not saying you, but I'll say I think it's a human issue. Even myself, is sometimes we like knowing, like we I think humans find it very uncomfortable not knowing, and we're very curious.
But that's
creatures.
what makes us human.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think creatures. So
but that's a good thing as well, isn't it?
I don't.
It can be arrogance, but it leads to a lot of good.
It's a lot of good, and I'm not saying, if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have all the things that we have.
Yeah.
Because our curiosity, we have science, all of this kind of stuff. The point I'm trying to make is that we're not always warranted in drawing the conclusions that we draw. And I'll give you an example. If, for example, there was a criminal matter where somebody had been stabbed, and then we would look at, well, what's the most likely answer? Is it that a ghost has stabbed them in their sleep, and this is why they're dead? Is it more
a ghost?
Yeah, ghost. Is it more probable that it was Bob because there was some infidelity?
Some beef,
with his wife or whatnot? He had a motive, or is it more likely that it was the baby, who his own baby who's 6 months old, who doesn't even, I'm not sure whether this is the case, but let's say 3 months old, who doesn't even have the ability, the strength to hold a knife of that size where you can see the incisions. And all I'm saying is that if for something to be a candidate possibility, you have to have evidence to warrant it.
Do you know what I would say? At the moment, when you mention those three, you sound like a theist.
Which one's most likely?
B, definitely.
Yeah. And why would you say that?
But I would say, as an atheist, you should add another option. Maybe no one stabbed him.
That's a good point. That's fine.
And that would be just considered ridiculous. And unless you're going to make the option that he stabbed himself.
So I'm saying,
like he just turned up with a hole in his chest.
So I give you.
No one would accept this.
I'll add D. What if? And this is possible. I wouldn't say it's the most likely, but it could be the case that he stabbed himself. But No.
I'm saying no one stabbed him. No, he didn't stab himself. There was no accident. There was no guilty person. There was no accident which happened, and he didn't commit suicide.
I'm so glad you put that one in. Okay, that's fine.
That's the atheist position.
That's not the atheist position.
And it's probable.
No. Yeah. That's not. What I'm saying is that, because I've even said, like, I don't mind there being a creator.
What it is, I'm about to leave and go and pray.
Yeah.
So I will just leave it with you to say what you're saying, but I am going to about 2 or 3 minutes.
I think the only point that I'm going to make is that I don't mind there being a creator as long as it can be substantiated. The only issue that I have is that from the thinking that's being used can't logically get you to the place that it's most likely a creator because of the flaws in the inconsistency of logic. That's the only point.
I disagree completely. Can I make a last point, if you don't mind?
No.
I would say what we discussed.
I'm not being rude. I'm just getting.
No problem. I done the same. What we discuss now is because there is a creation which we can witness and observe. Our argument is that there should be a creator. That's one of our arguments. The second argument for us would be, which we can't discuss now, but I just want to list it if you don't mind. Maybe it will stay in your mind. The second argument would be, we would say it's a natural disposition for the human being, like this, the same way human beings, without religion, without culture, we understand helping an elderly person is good. Lying is bad. This is something which is instinctive in human beings, I would say.
I don't mind, but
okay. But we say that it's a natural instinct in human beings to recognize a creator and seek to worship that creator.
I would disagree. The only reason, and I can answer.
No problem.
Argument of ad populum.
No problem. But I'm just because maybe perhaps another time we can open the discussion. The third, we would say, by the fact that people have appeared in history. Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, peace be upon him. Even though if people claim different teachings concerning them, we would say all of them had this central core that there is one God. So these are the reasons we would give. But if you don't mind, I'm going to go.
Do you know, brother, what's your name?
Yusuf,
nice to meet you. I'm going to go. So what's your name, brother? Isa.
What's your name?
Will.
Very nice to meet you.
It won't be the last time.
We're here every Saturday.
Has he given you a Quran?
Do you know what? I'll come in.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. We'll take care. All the best.
Here's a man to ask.
Can I take them off?
Yeah, take them off.
Should we go in the Mars? Who's who?